Okay, get this. Imagine you break your hip. You go through a major surgery, you do everything right, and then you find out your bone just won't heal. It sounds crazy, but for up to a third of young people with a certain kind of hip fracture, that's their reality.
So, today we're talking about something called a femoral neck non-union. It's this super frustrating, really debilitating problem where a critical fracture in the body just fails to mend. And in this explainer, we're going to look at the absolutely ingenious ways surgeons are fighting back.
All right, so here's the game plan. We'll start by figuring out what this unhealing hip is all about. Then we'll dive into the biomechanical puzzle of why it happens. After that, we'll explore two really different solutions. One's all about mechanics, the other is all about biology. And then we'll see how putting them together is getting some incredible results.
All right, first things first. Let's make sure we're all on the same page about what we're dealing with here.
A non-union is, well, it's pretty much exactly what it sounds like. The two ends of a broken bone just don't unite. See, after you break a bone, your body is supposed to kick off this amazing repair process. But in this one specific spot, the femoral neck, which is right under the ball of your hip joint, that whole process can just grind to a halt. And that leaves the patient in pain, unable to walk properly. It's a huge problem.
So the big question is, why? Why does this one specific fracture have such a terrible track record? Well, it turns out it's a really complex puzzle, and it has two main pieces.
The word surgeons use is mechanobiological, and I love that word because it perfectly sums up the two-sided nature of the problem. It's not just a mechanical thing, with bones not lining up, and it's not just a biological thing, like poor healing. It's both, happening at the exact same time.
So let's break that down. You've got two core reasons for failure. On one hand, you have the mechanical challenge. The hip is a massive weight-bearing joint, right? So if the forces pulling on that fracture are unstable, new bone just doesn't stand a chance of growing across the gap. Then, on the other hand, you have the biological challenge. The ball of your hip joint has this really delicate blood supply. The initial break can easily damage it, which basically starves the bone of all the good stuff it needs to heal.
To really get the mechanical part, think about gluing two pieces of wood together. Shear forces are like trying to slide those pieces past each other while the glue is still wet. It's never going to work, right? But compressive forces, that's like clamping the wood together. That's what makes the bond strong. Well, it's the exact same idea with bone. Compression is good. Shear is very, very bad.
And here's the kicker. Those bad shear forces often come from the angle of the break itself. A surgeon named Powell's was the first to realize just how critical this was. The more vertical or steep that fracture line is, the more it turns your own body weight into a destructive force that's actively trying to pull the bone apart. So a steeper angle means a much higher risk of it never healing.
Now, for the biological side of the puzzle, it is all about blood supply. The femoral head, that's the ball of the joint, is only fed by a few tiny little blood vessels. A bad break can just tear right through them, cutting off the blood flow. When that happens, the bone cells literally die. It's a condition called avascular necrosis, or AVN. And here's the simple, brutal truth. Dead bone cannot heal, period.
Which leads us to the million-dollar question for surgeons, right? How in the world do you solve this two-part problem? How do you fix the bad mechanics and fix the broken biology to give this bone a real fighting chance?
Okay, so solution number one takes that mechanical challenge head on. It's a procedure with a very long name, but trust me, the idea behind it is just beautiful in its simplicity. It's called the valgus intertrochanteric osteotomy. The whole concept is so clever. The surgeon actually re-breaks the bone on purpose, but lower down, in a very controlled way. They take out this tiny, precisely measured wedge of bone, and by doing that, they can change the angle of the entire top part of the femur. They tilt the femoral neck so it's more horizontal, what they call a valgus angle. And just like that, they turn those destructive shear forces into helpful, healing, compressive forces. They literally create the perfect mechanical environment for that original fracture to finally heal. And this isn't just theory. You can see how well it works with real data. Check this out. In one study, the average angle of these fractures was a super steep 71 degrees before the surgery. After the osteotomy, they got it down to a much more stable 47 degrees. They literally changed the physics of the hip joint.
And what happens when you change the physics? You get a 97% union rate. That's from the same study. Just by fixing the mechanical problem, surgeons got the bone to heal in nearly every single patient. That's an unbelievably powerful technique.
But, what if fixing the mechanics isn't enough?
What if the real problem is the biological one? Well, that brings us to our second set of solutions, which are all about giving the healing process a biological boost.
Now, the strategies here can be pretty straightforward, or they can get really complex. A surgeon might use a simple bone graft, which basically just provides a scaffold for new bone to grow on. Or, a more advanced option is what you could call a biological cocktail that's full of growth factors. But the most powerful technique of all? That's a vascularized graft. They actually transplant a piece of living bone from the patient's lower leg, complete with its own artery and veins still attached.
And that vascularized graft is just a total game changer, because it's not just a scaffold, it's a life support system. As one study put it, it literally helps to reconstruct the femoral head blood supply. You're not just hoping for healing, you're delivering it.
Okay, so we've got a powerful mechanical solution, and we have several powerful biological solutions. You can probably see where this is going. The next logical step was to put them together and create the most effective strategy of all.
One group of researchers calls their combined approach the triple attack, which sounds pretty awesome. Here's what they do. First, they boost the biology by packing bone graft into the fracture gap. Second, they enhance the mechanics with that valgus osteotomy to create compression. And third, they add super strong, stable fixation with a plate and screws to lock it all in place. They are hitting every single part of that mechanobiological puzzle all at once.
And really, this is the ultimate takeaway here. By figuring out both the mechanical and the biological reasons for failure, and then systematically going after each one, surgeons can turn what used to be a near hopeless situation into a predictable success.
And just look at these results. In a study that combined a vascularized graft with that stable plate fixation, they got a 100% union rate. 100%. Even more impressive, 0% of their patients developed that dreaded bone death, avascular necrosis. They didn't just heal the break, they saved the entire hip.
But what does a number like that actually mean for a patient? Well, this number, plus 36.6, represents the average improvement in something called the Harris Hip Score, which measures pain and function. An improvement of over 36 points is massive. That's the difference between being in constant pain and barely being able to move and living a full, active life. It is a truly life-changing result.
So this leaves us with a final thought. We've seen how surgeons have taken this incredibly complex puzzle, broken it down into its mechanical and biological parts, and then developed these specific, powerful tools to solve each piece. The question now is, as these techniques get even better and more common, can we finally make this devastating problem, the unhealing hip, a thing of the past?